folks that don't know me, I think I know most of the people in the room. My name is Jim Baker. I'm the executive director / lead of the Arlington Area Renewal Project. For the people in the room that are not familiar with the Arlington Area Renewal Project, we're a grassroots effort made up of citizens in the Arlington area that came together around September of 2017 to try to take a look at how could we assist the town fathers and other folks in town to help develop the town, stabilize the town, do whatever we could do to collaborate. Our mantra is we collaborate for the greater good. We don't have an agenda. We worked with the school early on the Section 9 report that was part of Act 49. We did a report on the town administrator and brought that to the town last year. And the town voters supported that 4-1. The select board's in the process of putting together a process to identify the first ever town administrator. As we've gone through the conversations with various folks in the area about the census at our school, the need for more volunteers on our fire department and rescue squad, the employers in town, we were shocked when we did an informal survey. We have about 1,000 employees that work within the boundaries of the town of Arlington, not including Sunderland and Sandgate. We also know that we have a bunch of folks that work from their homes. We did a check at the Secretary of State's office about 1.5 years ago, and within the geographic area of Sunderland, Sandgate, and Arlington, there was over 600 LLCs. So as this conversation went on, we realized that you will often hear people talk about we need more jobs in Vermont. And we came to the conclusion, maybe not scientifically, and that's part of the conversation we'll have today, that we don't have a job problem in the Arlington area. What we have is a housing problem. I've heard it over and over again. Where's Nicole Valley? Nicole's from HR to Orbis. She emailed a bunch of us over the weekend. They have new employees coming in that can't find rental property. That's an example of it. When we talked to realtors about 4 or 5 months ago, they have clients looking for housing that fit in a certain standard, and it's hard to find that housing for families. And where that plays out for us in town is it's impacting our census at the school, which eventually could affect the future of our school. If our census doesn't get up or stabilize, these are terms that people are used to Jim Baker saying, the state could eventually shut our oxygen off. It could become so expensive for us to run our school because we don't have the census up, we don't get the reimbursement back from the state, that we can't keep our school going. And for the people here in the room that are from Arlington, do not challenge us about our school, because we are very damn proud of our school and what our kids do with that school. So the idea came about that we would bring together a varying group of folks that had an interest in the housing issue in Arlington and just talk about it through a panel discussion. And at the end of the day, I'll walk us through the schedule in a minute. At the end of the day, we'll have time to really pull out some ideas that will go into a report that we will provide to the town fathers and to the planning commission that will become an appendix to the town plan. But myself and other folks that are involved in this conversation, we're not the kind of folks that write a report to go on a shelf. I worked in government for 31 years, state government. You would need a fleet of tractor trailer units to move reports that have been done over the years and no action has been taken on. That's not our intent. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to introduce Keith Squires, the chair of the select board, to say a few words.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming on behalf of the town. My name is Keith Squires. I'm the chair of the board. I've been for a few years. And This is a topic that Jim and I have talked about several times over the last year or so. It's the importance of housing in the town is just as he talked about. And the businesses need to find places for their people or new people to try to live in the town as much as we can keep them in the town rather than having people commute from all over the countryside to come here to work. The schools, obviously, numbers in schools need to stay up for all the reasons that you guys already know about. So I won't take a lot of time. On behalf of the town, again, thank you for coming. I think we'll have some good discussion here today, and we'll all go out the door tonight with some good ideas and be able to move forward with it. Thank you.
So again, the idea of this, and Holly said this, and I want to repeat it. When we put the agenda together and we put the panel discussion together, we thought that we were hitting topics that we needed to hit. It's not predisposed in our minds. I'm going to be the one that ends up writing the report. It's not predisposed in our minds where we're going. So it's the same way with the questions. Each one of you have a different question at the table for a different discussion. We kind of whittled down from maybe 8 to 10 questions, thinking that these were some of the key questions that could start a conversation at the table that could get your brain juices flowing a little bit as we work our way through the day. These are not preset that we think this is the course, but we do think that these questions are applicable because of the conversations we've had with folks around town. And we may not have gotten all that right, but again, as you report out, don't be afraid to say to us, we don't think this, our group doesn't think it's an issue, or this is the reason why it's an issue. So I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm going to go by question, because that's what Holly's giving me on the script here. Who has the question about why are distressed properties a problem for the Arlington area? So I bet you, let me guess, Kate's the reporter. Am I right?
I am. And to keep things short and sweet, we definitely talked a lot about specifics, but really to kind of, as an overview, we talked about why they're a problem in our community. And we talked about the health impact that distressed properties can have on our community, not just for the residents of those properties, but when they're vacant and we have animals and wild animals, not so nice, long-tailed animals. We talked about that it's a marketing, from the marketing perspective for our town. If people come through town and see lots of distressed properties and there's a cute little cafe, how are they going to keep going and hit Manchester or Bennington, whichever way they're headed? So there's a marketing issue that distressed properties have for our community. We talked about, this was more of an evolving conversation about distressed properties lowering the value of homes around them. And what does that look like? Do people actually go to the town and say, we want our taxes lowered because, or we want our home value lowered? Or are they really going to the town saying, we want these properties picked up? And so there's not so much appeals on lowering the value of current homes, rather appeals to have people be held accountable for those distressed properties. We talked about the common level of appraisal and how that can be affected if a home is valued at $150,000 or a property that is then sold for $80,000. If there's multiple of those types of properties, what does that do to the community brand list? And how does that affect taxes of those who do have their homes in good position? That's really kind of sums up what we were talking about.
Let me ask this. Why aren't people building homes, including apartments, in the Arlington area? Who has that?
That was us.
Okay, thanks for the report.
So I'm Faith. I lived in Arlington for 15 years. I have 5 kids, and I'm a real estate managing broker at Josiah Allen in Manchester, but I live in Arlington. So this was a great question. So the reason why, in our opinions, we don't think people are building homes, including apartments in Arlington, is the cost of construction. So from a real estate perspective, on a new build, you're looking at about $240 a square foot. That's including labor and materials, infrastructure, things like that, versus an existing home. I think the average median price per square foot is about $125. So it doesn't make sense. The second reason that we came up with is the cost of land is too high and the infrastructure to build. So in 2007, the state passed new regulation on wastewater, including the permitting and process that you have to go through for septic designs. And that's a whole nother problem, as I'm sure Michelle can attest to. When you're looking at building, so people who say to me, I want to buy a home, and they can't find that home, so now they're looking at land. When I explain to them the process of building, they get to the septic design and they're out looking at homes again. So also I would say, especially in West Arlington, there's no internet and there's no cell phone. So even on Tory Lane North, which is probably a road of 10 homes or less off of 7A, Consolidated Communications owns that road, and so you have Comcast literally on 7A and not on that road. And I've had some buyers walk away from buying a home that I had listed there because there is no internet. It's satellite only, which is completely unreliable. So I would say that's the two biggest reasons for that point. And then the third point is, there's a lot of really cute homes in the village of East Arlington, but post-Irene, FEMA adopted new flood zones, and that entire area is 95% flood zone. And that's a real problem for prospective buyers. There's fear with that, there's cost involved with flood insurance. And I would also add to that flood zone, the railroad tracks do detract from value, which we can't do anything about, but it's an issue.
The next question I have coming up is, why is it difficult for people working in Arlington to find a home in town? Who had that question?
You did.
You did.
And I'm reporting.
So you're reporting out very good, because Bill and Keith were not going to do that.
Right, exactly. We're a small group here. I'm Diane Derby with Senator Leahy's office, and joining me, we have a small group here. So we have Keith Squires, the Arlington Select Board Chair, and Bill Henry, the Land Use Administrator, who also happens to issue housing permits. So the question of why is it difficult for people working in Arlington to find homes in town, we were asked to come up with 3 reasons, some of which have already been pointed to in the earlier conversations. Existing housing stock has been fixed up and it's too costly for entry-level buyers. Average income doesn't allow for new housing starts. Bill mentioned that there are no new housing permits even in the works in Arlington, largely because of prohibitive costs, which we refer to as $240 a square foot. And also the fact that people are finding more affordable housing just in the areas around town, so they're commuting from more rural areas where the housing costs are lower. Those being as far over as New York, where they're finding lower housing costs. Anything else forgotten there? That's short and sweet.
The next question.
Okay, quick, I have
Yes.
a question before
Yes.
we move on. The existing housing stock too expensive, and we've had a lot, actually, the Renewal Project met with a group of realtors to talk about where the gap was. So I think it's important to address what they saw as the gap, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, those of you, who were at that meeting, but we have housing, $250,000 and up. We have really inexpensive homes that are in horrible condition. It's really the middle group that we're looking at. So can you give me a price range roughly as to the group we can't find homes for?
So we were discussing that around our table, and there's generally 55 to 65 homes on the market in Arlington at any time during the year. And as of yesterday, when I checked the MLS, there were 28. And that's from foreclosures and distressed properties of 50,000 all the way up to 3.7 million. The sweet spot for Arlington to get families in would be 250 and under. In Arlington, once you drop below a price of 150, you've got some work to do on the homes. And those homes, without a whole lot of work from the realtor and the seller and the buyer, won't qualify for USDA, FHA, or 3% down properties because those financing stipulations are strict.
Okay, and I say to you, I was talking to the principal of the high school, and she had some families come who wanted to come into our school system, and Sarah was actually helping them try and find a place to live. So, and that's exactly what was happening. It was that sweet spot, so thank you.
People are moving to Arlington because of the schools.
Right.
That's the #1 reason. Doctors' families do not move to Arlington because they have to be within about 15 minutes to be on call to the hospital, and we're outside of that 15 minutes. People who move north of Arlington, including Sandgate, Sunderland, and Manchester, are moving there because of school choice. So if we want to attract those families, we're doing it because of the school, but we don't have the inventory right now.
Faith, of the 27 homes you said that are on the market, and you might not know this off the top of your head, how many are in that sweet spot?
250 under,
250 and under to 150?
probably less than 40%.
I was looking at Zillow.
So like
something.
80? Yeah, if that.
But that includes all the way down to $50,000 fixer-uppers.
But you can't, I mean, some of those are, like you said, they have to be cash buyers and they have to be able to totally renovate the home. If they're foreclosures or we still have a lot of those around.
So this is a real valid point. I don't want to get too far off the agenda. This is a valid point that I just want to make. And just put this in your head and think about it. On a personal level, I've never been a person in my entire working life in the various leadership roles I had. I don't take no for an answer. Okay? So when I hear things like, okay, people don't want to invest in a $50,000 fix-up, the goal of this exercise is to find a solution to that, right? And a little bit later, we'll hear from, I'll call on some folks in the room about potential solutions for that. That's why there's representatives from the state and federal government here. We're not looking for you to come fix our problems, folks. We'll take care of ourselves. We just need a little help. And we want Arlington on the map, because we're in the Arlington area, because we're pretty proud of what we do here. So I just want to make that point. So when we get to the end of the day, as I've often said in many situations I find myself in, don't start with talking about money, because that shuts the conversation down. Well, we can't afford that. So just be thinking about that as we work our way through this. And let me get us back on the agenda here. Does the quality of rental properties in Arlington need to be improved? If so, why and how? And do health inspectors play a role? Who has that question?
That's me. I was surprised. We talked a little bit about Section 8 housing and Shires housing, which those two types of housing we thought were in pretty good shape because the regulations are much stricter, very tough. They're much tougher on housing quality, but the problem is small landlords who have 1 or 2 units. And that is the big difficulty in terms of condition because they don't have the regulations and very often they're making so little money themselves. And we talked about the people in terms of rental housing who are really being squeezed are the people in the middle who don't qualify for the subsidies in terms of getting rental housing in Arlington. And we talked only for a minute at the end about health inspections playing a role. We didn't really have enough information. I don't know how it works in Arlington in terms of health inspections.
Did you introduce your table?
What's that?
Did you introduce your
I did at the
table? Oh, you
beginning.
did?
Yes.
Was I sleeping?
That was the most fascinating part.
Brian, you're a fascinating guy to begin with. Thank you.
To put some additional information out there about the health inspection portion. Recently, the state of Vermont increased the protections and the enforcement that health inspectors can do. And one of the reasons that seems that their target was to improve the quality of rental properties, so that the health inspector can go in to the property and say, I want to look at this. So that very much is a reflection of other towns who have been very aggressive in using the health inspector role to try and, quite frankly, in the name of protecting the resident, right? Because the landlord's not protecting the resident. So we are interested, as we go along with this, to think about strengthening the role of health inspection, perhaps in Arlington. And the other thing that we thought was interesting about the rental properties was the number of landlords. And I know, folks, on 313, we have a landlord that lives out of state. He has no investment in Arlington, right? So I would say out of state
And
landlords.
we, just so you know, we actually invited a couple of landlords to come, and I'm not surprised they didn't come. Yes?
I have to say, on behalf of landlords, that there is a general feeling of against landlords, and that's not true. Like they said, there's a lot of people in town that do rent properties to try to help to their income a little, and they're not all slumlords, and they also have a lot of restrictions about what they can do when they get people in there that are destroying the property and making it look like crap and everything, that their hands are tied in many ways. That they can't always get rid of tenants who are not treating the property well.
And again, just to put in a bookmark here, or a place marker, we're not, this conversation often comes up about landlords in the last year and a half. One of the things that we see the Renewal Project doing is trying to create social fiber for a healthy community. That's why we're so supportive, for example, of the Batkill Valley Health Center and collaborating with them on different projects. I think what we're talking about is not that landlord is trying to do the right thing. We're talking about the landlord that's doing nothing. Again, we're not trying to single anybody out, because at the end of the day, an unsafe house is not where people who are challenged socioeconomically end up getting taken advantage of.
Oh, yeah.
So that's our point here, is that then we have a kid coming into the school that's living in an environment that's not safe, and the school's dealing with that. That's traumatic.
Yeah.
And so this is not, so this issue around housing is much more complicated than just someone sees us picking on a landlord. And I'm not pushing back against you, because I know landlords that are doing the right thing. But I also know landlords, one that I had a conversation with last week, who has very much the means to straighten out his piece of property, who absolutely refuses to do it.
Yeah.
And so, again, part of this conversation is about creating a healthy community where people can thrive.
Yeah.
So without action, what will Arlington look like in 2025? Now, where's the future seers? Hi, Stephanie, how are you?
So our question was, without action, what will the Arlington area be like in 2025? So some of the things that we thought might be a consequence of lack of action would be a population decline would continue, and it was noted that in the last census there was some decline already, and that we'll see that continue without a lack of investment in the housing stock. We thought that the housing stock would continue to decline. It's aging housing stock, and without some sort of significant investment, we felt that would continue to decline and fall into disrepair. Some of the existing homes we felt would be too expensive to purchase and repair. Families might be able to get in the door, but doing the work after the fact could be really challenging for some families. And as was noted, there are many homes at $50,000 and under, but for you to undertake that, is definitely a challenge without resources for a typical family. And so we thought that those would continue without some interference and some assistance, that those would continue to decline and potentially end up as unoccupied zombie homes in that case. We thought businesses could potentially decide to relocate due to lack of housing for their employees, lack of decent quality housing that their employees could afford. We thought that there could be an exodus of some of the businesses locally. We thought taxes might increase as a result of those businesses leaving the area, not there to share the tax burden, that it would fall then on the remaining residents of the town to maintain the infrastructure. And potentially a health decline of the residents as the housing stock ages. There's definitely a connection between population health and the quality of their housing. So we felt that these were, you know, fireflies, famine, locusts. We thought these were some of the, oh, and the schools as well. I'm sorry, we didn't note that one. That some of the schools might close because of lack of attendance or enrollment in the local schools.
The last question we had is, can Arlington develop without improvements to infrastructure? If infrastructure changes need, what are they? If no, what action should be taken in 2020 to begin that improvement? Who's reporting out on that? Let me guess. Don Keelan.
No, not necessarily. Let me just add one point of interest, I think, to your table about rental housing. In my other life, I built, during my watch, we built thousands of homes south of here in 7 different states. And as a real estate developer, we've done, my son now owns a company here in Vermont, we've done about 60 to 70 homes between here and Rutland. A real estate developer generally would like to have rental properties. They would prefer rental over selling, whether it's condominiums or single family. The reason for it is there's a great advantage to a real estate developer in owning rental housing. So they would prefer it because of the tax advantages, because you have to go through the approval process. Why go through it and have to then sell it? You might as well hold on to it because it takes so long to go through it. So there's, and I can speak because I've spoken to many developers. I'm sure Kirk would probably support me in this. Developers would prefer to build rental housing. The problem is in building rental housing in Vermont, it's very difficult to get through the process, right? And then once you even get through the process, then what you have to do to have, and that was mentioned over there, the rules and regulations. So we can talk about that later today. But you know, there is a perspective, because I just came back from Charleston and Washington, and the amount of rental housing being developed down there is phenomenal. And me, there's an attitude, we welcome it. So we have to work on that up here. The question we had was, can Arlington grow without having the proper infrastructure? You mentioned broadband. That's a major issue, obviously. And the other one, and infrastructure is both sewer, wastewater treatment, as we put it, and water. Well, the water issue is not a big issue now, but the town is expanding and the town is taking over the water company. But there is a major issue with wastewater treatment. And that is being addressed now, I believe, by the school, because the only wastewater treatment plant we have in town is over by the school, and it's way under capacity, and there's an opportunity now maybe to utilize that capacity. But if you speak to the property owners in East Arlington and the central part of the town, one of the things that are holding back development is the inability to treat wastewater. And that, in this, you know, in the year 2019, to have that as an issue is really surprising. I mean, and especially when I look at my town south of here in Powell, how they just spent, they did a $22 million treatment for wastewater. I mean, we may not need $22 million, but we need something because it's impacting growth. Is that the consensus? And yet we can, if we address it, we can work on it. And that has been missing, the addressing of the problem. And if you talk to the individual owners of properties, especially in East Arlington, where there's a major issue of failure of systems, we have to, and I hope it comes out of this renewal project, that we get to work on that.